Well, good morning, my friends. As Pastor Gordon explained, we are having a bit of a scenario with COVID, and I'm still waiting on my results. I don't know if I have it or not. So we didn't want to run a risk of me exposing the tech team. And so I am recording from my home, so you get a little bit of a glimpse into how I live and my sweet 60s furniture with the this beautiful green color. It is a pretty comfy chair though. So, and I have my Lane furniture table here that was made in my hometown. So it's just kind of something cool about me, I guess, that you can learn. And so today we are learning how to fight. All right. Okay. Well, that's partially true. We're learning how to fight fair. And so if you're human and imperfect, which I believe we all are, then at different points in our life, we will fight. Whether it be with a partner, a family member, a friend, or a coworker. Disagreements are common, and sometimes, unfortunately, they accelerate to arguments, which then accelerate to fights. And so the first thing I want to do is give you terms that will always, without a doubt, help you put some water on the fire if you begin to fight with someone. Okay, so first one. This works more so in romantic relationships, typically when said from a man to a woman. So it's guaranteed to help diffuse the situation. Okay, you ready? Guys, you might want to take some notes here. I promise, this is a foolproof way of just diffusing an argument, okay? So, all right, whenever your woman is mad at you, this is all you have to say. Okay. So imagine the argument is all the way up. And you say, I think you're making a big deal over nothing. Here's what you need to do. If you would just calm down, I'll talk to you when you're being rational. Because right now, you're being just like your mother. Okay. Don't say those things. Definitely do not say any of those things. Hopefully you know I was being sarcastic. Or if you want to say those things, it's a surefire way of being single. Okay, so things not to say. First one, we know you don't want to tell somebody to calm down. So anybody you're in an argument with, don't say calm down. Typically they'll respond, I'll show you calm, right? Okay. Don't say calm down. Next one, you shouldn't feel that way. You shouldn't feel that way. Everybody is justified in how they feel. And so we have no right in telling people how they feel in the moment. They're feeling that way because it's important. They're feeling that way for a reason. Something that you said may have triggered them. And so they are certainly entitled to feel that way. Next one, you're making a big deal over nothing. Sort of along the same lines as the last one. They're making a big deal, or they're making a deal out of it because it is important. And so you don't have the right to tell them how important it is to them. Next one, I'll talk to you when you're being rational. Yeah, that just, that's probably not going to go over well because we know when we have emotions, when we get worked up, sometimes we aren't being as rational as we could be, but you are in the argument, you're in it, and so it's better, if you can do it using the healthy tips that we're going to talk about a little bit later, to talk about it then. And so that one, just try to avoid. All right, next one is you're just like your blank. So you're just like your mother. We would hope that we only have good things to say about, somebody's, our whether it's our partner's mother or father, but sometimes we use that as an insult, right? If we don't think too highly of them or some of their negative traits, then we say those things. You're being just like this person. And you're being such a insert sometimes bad words into that one. You're being such a, okay, that one is an insult, so that's only going to accelerate things. And, it's just only going to make them angrier. Other things to avoid are try to not say you never or you always, those absolutes, right? So very rarely is anything ever absolute. And so maybe the person that you're in argument with or in conflict you're fighting with, maybe they had done something differently one or two or three times out of the past 10, and that was an improvement for them. And then when you go and say you always or you never do that, then it makes them feel like maybe that work they've done or those attempts at being better have just gone unnoticed. And so try not to deal in absolutes. So studies have shown that 96% of arguments are determined in the first 3 minutes. 96% of arguments are determined in the first 3 minutes. And I don't know, upon thinking about that, I almost would say that all arguments or 96% of arguments are determined really in the first 30 seconds, because normally when people are worked up or they have something that they want to address, then kind of right from the get-go, it's how we start, right, that can determine where we end up. And so tone, we'll talk a little bit more about that, what kind of tone is used, and just what kind of attitude you come into that argument or that fight with. And so right from the get-go, we have to establish just a place of peace as much as we can, and try to get off on the right foot on whatever fight we're having. So along with those sayings that you should never use, these are actual dirty fighting tactics that you want to avoid as much as possible. Okay, so they're going to be listed here. Dirty fighting tactics. First one is the silent treatment. All right, well, we know what that means. We want to avoid that as much as possible. That's just not going to get us anywhere, right? It's not going to be productive. It's not going to be fruitful. No conversation. So if you don't have any conversation, then you're not going to get anywhere. So avoid the dirty fighting tactic of the silent treatment. The second one is blaming or attacking. So even if, the argument is more so something that person did, you're really not going to get anywhere if you just immediately attack or blame that person for all of your issues, okay? It's just going to put them on the defensive. The next one is condescension. So being condescending, talking down to them or acting as if you're up here and they're down there, or you're better than them in any way. So once again, that's just going to make them feel inferior, and you want to put yourselves on a level playing field. Next one, name calling. Really don't have to say anything more about that, but insults, name calling, and those things is just not going to get you where you want to go. Sarcasm. I think we know what that is. I'm going to go through a couple more of these here. It's a long list, right? So shouting, any elevated voices can trigger people to shut down. So we want to try to keep our voice, at a level volume. Okay, denying, that just simply be denying that there is a problem or denying that you did anything wrong. Once again, you want to acknowledge why that person is upset. Walking away. Last one is walking away, simply just avoiding the problem. We're not going to get anywhere, right? And so, boy, if we, I don't know about you all, but that was quite a list, and that was only like half the list, okay? I don't know about you all, but I'm feeling a little convicted here. Certainly in my past, I have unfortunately used some of these dirty fighting tactics, and it's sort of it's sort of convicting because, you know, that's why we're fighting. Like that could also be one of the reasons why we're fighting. So we have the issue, and then we employ this dirty fighting tactic, and that's why we're in a fight, right? And because we have used these dirty tactics. So if we can't fight dirty, then how do we fight? And I think that's the big question. So you know, one of the scenes that runs through my head. Yeah, I'm you know, well, I'm an '80s, born in the '80s, so '90s child, I guess. And you know, aging myself here. I know some of you are laughing about that. But I grew up watching The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, one of the best shows growing up, and it always had a really good message in there. That was the thing about a lot of those shows growing up. I just loved, you know, Family Matters, Full House, all that stuff, TGIF, and so Fresh Prince. There's a scene here, a really famous fighting scene with him and Tyra Banks. So Tyra Banks was his girlfriend. I think she had come in from West Philadelphia, you know, out to California, and so she comes in, and you know, she caught him doing something. There was this misunderstanding that, you know, obviously, you know, Will Smith had gotten into trouble for something, and so they start arguing, and they're just like shouting stuff at the same time, talking over everybody, and they're not really hearing one another. And then like they have a few lines where they're going at, and they both at the same time say, "You're never going to change. You're never going to change. You know, I'm going to get the last word. I'm going to get the last word. No, you're not. No, you're not." And then they just both throw up their hands in disgust and walk away. So there you have like multiple dirty fighting tactics in one argument, and then they just went their separate ways, and of course they didn't accomplish anything, and they were in conflict. So if any of us have used any of those dirty fighting tactics, or even if we haven't, maybe you know, we didn't say any of those things, but we're in an argument, we are in conflict, right? I mean, sometimes when we don't use those sayings, things can still be taken the wrong way, right? Especially over text. That's why if it's anything important, that's another thing. So communication, it's really good to avoid arguing over texting, because you don't know the tone of voice, and something that you could say that you type over text might come across totally like a little too stern, right? It can be taken the wrong way. So even in person, even when we say the right things, our tone can cause an argument, right? It's like the same phrase can be said with a different tone and be taken a different way. Like say you ask somebody a question, and they could say, "I don't know," or they say, "I don't know," right? Two totally different ways of responding to that. A nice, "I don't know," or "I don't know," right? So tone makes a big difference. And then sometimes people will tell us, right, like, "I just don't like your tone. It's your tone of voice." Oftentimes, right, parents, I like remember, you know, a lot of times mothers will say that when they're in arguments with their kids, you know, "I don't like your tone of voice when you're talking to me." I'm sure none of you have ever experienced that with your kids, right? Okay, so what happens next? If we're in conflict, we have entered this fight mode, and oh man, that ego is kicked in, and we're in the defensive, and we got to take up for ourselves. We got to be right. And you know what's worse? Is sometimes it's worse being right. Sometimes what we're fighting over, when we're right, makes things even worse, because then we feel justified. And then we're mad about what we're right about because it should have been fixed a long time ago. So there really is no winner in fighting. And that's the one thing about fighting and the ways we fight. You know, if it hasn't changed so far, then why do you think continuing to fight the same way will produce different results? Let me say that again. if fighting a certain way hasn't changed the situation so far, then why do you think continuing to fight the same way will produce different results? Fighting, just like most things, end up falling into a rather typical pattern. For example, how many times have you argued with a friend or your partner, and then one of you say, we always end up fighting, or we always end up fighting about the same thing, right? It's so predictable, it's almost pathetic. But that also means it can be preventable. When that is said, that you always end up fighting, you might be angry, but it usually includes a degree of remorse. That little light of your softened heart has shone through, but you just don't know what to do about it. You or the person you're fighting with, hopefully the both of you, want to change. Neither of you are completely heartless, even if that was thrown around as one of those dirty fighting tactics, that it was an insult. But the way you've approached the fight has put the person in defensive mode. And so nobody wins, right? Nobody wins. And when we're fighting too, we don't like to have a draw. You got to have the last word. We all like to have the last word. And even with Christians, it's kind of funny. We throw out the last words, but we do it in a really passive aggressive way. And so you might know some of those sayings. Maybe you've used them yourself, but the famous, you finished an argument and you say, well, bless your heart, or I'll pray for you. And normally that would be a really good thing, but not said in that context, right? Or not said with that passive aggressivity. And so, we just want to remember a good Proverbs quote: to do not say, I'll do to them as they have done to me. I'll pay them back for what they did. I'll do to them as they have done to me. I'll pay them back for what they did. Yeah, we don't want to do that. Instead, we are called to be peacemakers. We know from Matthew, one of the Beatitudes, that blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. So what is a peacemaker? Well, the definition is one who makes peace, especially by reconciling adversaries. It's unfortunate, but I think the word peacemaking, and this is super important, I think the word peacemaking is something that a lot of Christians get wrong. A lot of us have the idea that peacemaking is more of an avoidance, if you will, that we simply bow down or give in as to avoid disrupting peace. There's the misconception that peacemakers should be passive and not cause trouble. But a simple look at the word tells us otherwise. So let's look at it again. Peacemaker. One who makes peace. Not keeps peace, but makes peace. This requires an action on our part to do something. And so what is that? How do we make peace? For starters, we must go towards the conflict. We must work within the conflict. See, if we were already at peace, then we wouldn't need to make peace. It would already be there. But Jesus brought disruption in order to bring true peace. He didn't avoid conflict or appease people. He didn't ignore tensions or differences. And so we must remember, there is no way to create peace without the wisdom that comes from resolving conflict. We must go through conflict. We must learn from that. So, how do we resolve this conflict once we're in it? Thankfully, we have a 4-step process for seeking reconciliation. This comes directly from our Matthew 18 passage for today. And so we're going to touch on this first step, go through all 4 steps, but then come back and look at this first step a little bit more, because that's the one we want to focus on. that's really focused on arguments amongst individuals. So the passage starts off, if your brother or sister sins or sins against you, go and point out their fault, just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. So you're going to go directly to the other person and work it out. That's the goal, right? That's always the goal, that you can just go to that individual and work it out without bringing anybody else into it. Doesn't always happen that way, right? So, and it continues, the passage continues, but if they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of witnesses. So, how often do we do this? Sometimes not always with good intentions, right? So, if there's an argument between two people, sometimes we'll bring in a third party in an unhealthy way. And we talked a little bit about this in our genogram workshop the other night with triangles. And so sometimes we'll bring in a third party that agrees with us. But the goal is to bring in a third party that's not invested in either side. And so, right, like a counselor, or just a third, it could be a third friend that just doesn't have a stake in either way, or wants the best interest of both people. So that would be advisable. All right, and so then it continues. If the matter is not resolved, then take one or two to act as mediators. And if they refuse to listen, tell it to the church. And can you imagine if like all of your problems that you had, all these arguments that you had with anybody were then like announced in front of the whole church? We might be handling things a little differently, right? But that's the way it's supposed to be. So just imagine all these conflicts in your life, all these arguments, all your fights, that if they're not resolved, that like we're just going to have like a prayer list. We're going to have our conflict list, right? Could you just imagine that? And so we'll print off a list and say, such and such is arguing over whose chicken pot pie is the best with this person, or so on and so forth, and it'd just be so silly. So we don't want to do that, and as much as Pastor Gordon and I love you, we don't want to have to work through every disagreement or fight you have, right? And so that's why it's important for you all to learn these skills and to work through fights on your own. And so then, if Scripture continues, if it's still not resolved, counseling hasn't helped, getting put on the spot in the church hasn't helped, then that's when you go to and get legal counsel for a binding decision. And so, if we kind of look at that from a real world perspective, how it's often applied, we so often jump to that fourth step, right? In arguments, in suing one another, in marriages, divorces, all this, we just automatically, like if we have a fight, sometimes we try to work through it amongst ourselves, sometimes not, and then we just skip down to that step forward and say, well, let's take legal action, when we haven't gone through the steps of mediation, of counseling, and just trying to work it out in a healthy way. And that's really unfortunate. So let's look at this first step again, and how to fight cleanly. So to do sort of a recap, avoid all those dirty fighting tactics. Avoid those sayings. Don't tell people to calm down. Tell people that they are validated, not that they shouldn't feel a certain way. So avoid all those things, right? Like don't say you always, or you never, or use insults, or any of those dirty fighting tactics. Shouting, denying, blaming, condescension, the list goes on and on, right? So first step is to avoid that. Second step is to remind that we are called to be peacemakers. And so what that actually entails is that we are to make peace. And that means to go towards conflict and to work through conflict. And the only way to have true peace is to work through that conflict. Because if we simply only avoid situations, we will never have true peace. And I think we know that. We feel that anxiety in our hearts, in our souls, when we have not worked through that conflict that was necessary to work through. So go towards conflict and acquire the wisdom that comes from working through that conflict. That wisdom will give you true peace. And then when we're working towards that conflict, to fight fair with the person that we are fighting with. And so, remind ourselves that we are all made in God's image. Even if that person is quirky or annoying or whatever it may be, they have traits and they were made in the image of God, and they have the gifts that you may not. And they may see the world from a different perspective, and they also have life experiences that are causing them to feel a certain way or to be triggered a certain way, and we must respect that. And so the steps to a clean fight, which will be posted. First step is to say, I notice. So if something is bothering you and you need to confront somebody, say, I notice that you've been doing this recently. Or I notice that you have been avoiding me lately. I notice that you seem to be a little hostile towards me. I notice that you seem to be upset with me. Whatever it may be, just simply state to that person that you notice something that's going on, or that something is a little off, and just see how that person responds. Simple fact that you have acknowledged that something is a little off may make the world a difference, that you are paying attention to them and paying attention to that distance that may be between you two. The second thing is to say, I value you, or I value something about you. We all want to be valued, we all want to be seen, and we all want to be heard. And so, simply start off a conversation by saying, I really value this about you. You may state what the problem is a little later on, but always remind that person that there is something about them that you certainly do value, and that you value your friendship, you value your relationship, and that because of that, you want to work through whatever issue it may be. The third one is, say, when you blank, I feel blank. And so when you do this, I feel that. When you raise your voice, then I feel anxious. Or when you ignore this, then I feel sad. Whatever it may be, use those descriptive words. Use the words to describe your emotions, and tell that person something they're doing is causing this. And so it's important to say, when you do this, not simply say, I feel this way, because they won't know why. But if they know that it's because it's something they are doing, then that will help them put it into context. And then the last one is to simply state your request. State your goal of whatever disagreement that you want to work through, and state it respectfully. Be very specific and include details. So be very specific with your goals and what it is that you want to accomplish, and that will help the other person and both of you be on the right track to this path of reconciliation. And so use these steps to fight clean, and I think you'll start off like, remember we said that 96% of all arguments are determined in the first 3 minutes, or I say even the first 30 seconds. So if we come out of the gate with these clean fighting tactics, and we clearly state our goals from the beginning, then it sets us off on the right path to reconciliation. And as followers of Jesus, that is something that something that should be our goal, to be reconciled. We are reconciled with God, and to also be reconciled with all of our brothers and sisters. And so I pray that if you are going through something, that you are that there is distance or tension between somebody that you care for, that you love, that you can use these steps, and that you can become reconciled with that person and be back together in a loving relationship and you both are centered on Christ's love. And so I hope you all have a blessed day, and just remember that you are loved by God. Amen.